sustainable. So on behalf of the CrossQ Network, I really want to express our thanks to this panel who were quick to say yes in speaking on this topic from all different angles and engaging you, our participants, in discussions and hearing your views as we explore this topic more about energy and quality infrastructure development. Now, today's webinar is the third in a series of 10 being planned over the next couple of months. And you may also be very interested in the next one, which will take the form of a town hall session on energy efficiency building code development and implementation between June the 15th and June the 17th. Keep linked to our social media or check our calendar on our website, www.crossq.org, for updates on the schedule of upcoming quality in energy activities. Thanks once again to TAPSEC and its partners for making this possible, and thank you in advance to the CARICOM Energy Unit, especially Dr. Garner, and CCREAS, CDF, CDB, and Get Invest for your participation today. I wish you all a fruitful discussion as we explore investment, energy, and quality. Now, I would like to turn the program over to our very experienced moderator, Dr. Devon Gardner. And as a way of introducing him, Dr. Gardner has been the program manager for energy and head of the energy unit at the Caribbean Community Secretariat since September 2014. In his role, Devon has oversight of the energy program, which is tasked with the identification of common policies and strategies for transforming the energy sector within the Caribbean community. This transformation requires a shift in a majority of the energy systems within the region from the current states of inefficiency and overdependence on imported fossil fuel, which exposes them to uncertainties and volatilities of mostly expensive global oil prices, to a state of great efficiency and high penetration of indigenous renewable sources. In particular, the energy program promotes a transition to energy systems that favor sustainable and clean energy production, as well as energy delivery and use, which simultaneously provides legal certainty for investors and improved predictability in price and supply for users. Previously, Devon was a technical advisor with the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center, or the 5Cs, and held multiple positions in academia, ranging from senior research fellow to professor in various universities within the Caribbean and Europe. Devon has published over 50 peer-reviewed articles, as well as numerous reports and studies, and received his Doctor of Philosophy degree in chemical physics with specialization in numerical analysis from the University of the West Indies, Mona campus in 2001. So with this, I would now like to pass you over to our very experienced and competent Dr. Devon Gardner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derek. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. With those kind words from Mr. Omar, I will attempt to moderate this session that will seek to help us to understand, the whole issue of investments in energy and how it is that our investments in energy are best when framed within an environment of a quality infrastructure. So that is really what we are seeking to achieve in this morning's discussion. And we do have a very, if you want to call it, I wouldn't want to overplay the word experience, but certainly this is a very experienced panel that we do have here, persons who have been working in the quality field and standards field, as well as those who are energy experts and those who are from. So we do have a good mix, a beautiful mix, I must say, of energy experts, financing experts, and of course, quality and standard experts in a single panel discussing the whole issue with us. I'm going to observe, use the protocols observed by Mr. Omar to proceed, and I will not go back through any salutations, but go directly into the panel. And I'm going to start with an overview, and in doing that overview, I'm going to share a small presentation that I think will frame some of the considerations that we are going to be discussing this morning. My screen is shared. So I just check and acknowledge that my screen is being seen. If my screen is being seen, Jerry, you guys seeing my screen? Just checking.
Yes.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, good. So as I said, we're talking investment in energy, and we're talking about the role of quality infrastructure and energy investment. So I really want to start with this particular slide here, which is one that speaks to the whole motivation behind a lot of what we are doing. The motivation around a lot of what we are doing in energy, yes, is cost related, but the central one is climate change and some of those external shocks that we face within CARICOM as a region, being small island developing states. We know, based on scientific work that has been done over the last, what one could say, 5 decades, but more so over the last 2 decades, that the small island developing states in the Caribbean are among the most vulnerable to the anticipated and projected impacts of climate change. Some of those impacts we expect are related to temperature rise, sea level rise, a lot of shifts in the hydrometeorological systems, such as hurricanes and storms that affect us already. And of course, precipitation changes, patterns in the changes in the precipitation patterns. And in order for us to continue living life as we know it, it may not be possible to live life as we know it even, but there, certainly in order for us to continue our existence within this part of the world, we'll have to adapt. And adapting our systems, adapting our food and water systems, adapting our energy systems in particular, because that's the central focus of today's conversation. Of course, our built environment too, and our ecosystems will have to adapt to how we build our houses, how we build our infrastructure, how it is that we build out our electricity grid and the different energy architecture that supports our access to modern energy is one that is going to be important. But what is also critical is that these adaptations of our systems are also going to be important to us adapting our lifestyle. Our socio-economic development will be we have to adapt our socio-economic development pathway, and our ability to adapt will be dependent on our systems being able to adapt. So after we have been able to adapt our systems to the potential impact of climate change, then it is that we'll be able to change the way in which we build our economic structures, change the growth strategies that we currently are undertaking in our countries, change the way in which we use technology, and change the way in which people live. In fact, change the way in which people live in such a way that they will have better qualities of life. The UN Sustainable Development Goal, in fact, is predicated upon a better quality of life for all. And so in that regard, if we are to that better quality of life to our people in CARICOM states, we must adapt our energy systems. And in so doing, there's a fortuitous result that we end up getting a mitigation result, in the sense that a lot of the systems that we will use to adapt our energy system will allow us to get also carbon abatement or reductions in greenhouse gas. So we get 2 for the price of 1. We are building more resilient systems that are allowing us to save the climate simultaneously. So we are adapting to the climate, but still at the same time, reducing the impact on the climate through that system. This is just for completion of notes. I don't expect you to read all of this now, but it just goes to show you some key terms that within the context of the vision for the energy sector in CARICOM, there is the issue of eco-efficiency, and you will see that here that come out a lot in the conversations later. There's the issue of infrastructure that allows us to produce energy more effectively. Security, energy security is one of the things you hear about, and energy resilience is one of the things that you hear about. So resilience and security, where energy is concerned, is important. And you'll see that again emerge in this goal number 3 about the resilience needs and the sustainable development targets of member states. where the region wants to become a global example of renewable energy use. And number 4 is really a critical piece, really around the governance, institutional and legal and regulatory framework. A large part of this is linked to the quality infrastructure, because the quality infrastructure is based on the institutional arrangements and the coordination and operation of the institutions that are going to ensure that we get what it is we pay for. In a sense, what is intended for us to achieve those energy goals in CARICOM is really a flexibility and adaptive program, where we have very flexible ways of providing energy, flexible ways of using energy. So we do not only use energy generators that follow what we call the demand, and you turn on more generators to meet new demand, but you also now begin to look at cases where the demand also follows the generators. So when you start to have situations where you have solar, which is produced at certain times of the day only, or you have wind, which is produced better at certain hours and certain times, we try to build systems that can suitably utilize and maximize that generation that's available to us in ways that meets our demand. So our demand becomes more time-driven and more generation-driven than it is in the past, where we usually just simply use whatever devices we want whenever we want, and the utilities simply turn on the generators to match whatever our use are. We are becoming more smart. And a critical piece of this whole thing is going to be the decentralization of generation and demand. And that is something we are going to talk about in the next few minutes, because within the context of the quality infrastructure, where energy is concerned, the centralized piece is usually okay, because that usually is regulated. And the regulator usually has very strict quality and standards through KPIs, key performance indicators, that those monopoly entities, what we call electric utilities, and those who support them, such as independent power producers, as part of that centralized arrangement within the energy sector, must meet. So you find the energy arbitrage has to do a lot with the negotiations and the contracts and the regulations that within which they operate, and the issues of frequency regulation and stability, and all of these issues, and the whole issue of voltage quality and power quality, and all of these things are usually treated very well within a regulatory environment that holds the utilities and all operators within that sphere to very high standards. And so the quality issue is not usually one that is questioned there, or one that is missing there. The place where we have a lot of the quality issues emerging is really within the decentralized area. This issue of demand and storage and decentralized generation and so on. And that's where a lot of the things will focus. So when we talk about decentralization, we talk about the fact that you have rooftop solar PV, or photovoltaic systems generating electricity. In some instances where countries are concerned, those which have appropriate laws allow two-way flow of power. So the power can flow from the utility grid to the residence, and from the residence itself back to the grid, so that the role of that photovoltaic system in, if you want to call it, that dynamic power flow arrangement and in interacting with the utility grid is important. And so ensuring that that meets certain specifications and standards is always going to be critical. The issue of appliances too, and the appliances also being used and utilized in certain amounts of energy, and their demand being something that is predictable is something that is important. If it is that we buy lights and we know that we have a certain amount of lighting in a certain house, and that this amount of lighting is supposed to consume a certain amount of energy, and if that energy is not what is being consumed by the lighting, then we are not going to be able to project and predict our demands accurately, and so on. We don't even start talking about the economics yet. So in that regard, the whole issue of the regional quality infrastructure for sustainable energy is one that is critical. There are a number of things that are already being done. The energy efficiency building code and performance standards for buildings is something that has come up. The whole issue of energy performance standards for solar water heating and solar PV systems and other distributed generation systems are being discussed. Then there is, of course, energy labeling for household appliances, and then the whole issue of metrology accreditation and assessments and so on. And the energy efficiency building code here, Mr. Omar spoke about to a large extent. Now we are using as a part of the model to drive a lot of these investments on the customer side, on the distributed side, what we call an integrated utility service, where it is that the customer can go to the utility, and it is the utility who pays the energy service actor to deliver the equipment to the customer. So that imagine you walking into your favorite utility, JPS, BL&P, T&Tech, and saying, I want to put solar photovoltaic systems on my roof, and I want a battery in my garage, so that I can store some of the power in my battery, so that in case anything, I also have the ability to connect off grid when there is no power in countries where there may be power cuts from time to time and interruptions of your power supply, and you want to be able to export to the grid and so on. And you say to the utility, I also want to improve my efficiency. I want to change out my air conditioning. I want to change out my lights and make them more efficient. I want to change from what I know of in terms of incandescents to LEDs. And your utility is able to package all of that for you. You know, as much as an insurance company would package a premium, a life premium or a medical premium, and say, this is how much you will pay per month in order to get this package. And you are able to do that. Now, the missing piece in all of that is that when you have been able to finance all of this, it's predicated on a saving. And that saving is what is going to facilitate your ability to pay for that investment. And unless the equipment is delivering what it is that you expect in terms of performance, if it is that you buy an LED lamp, and that LED lamp says it will operate for 100,000 hours, and it will consume 5 kilowatts per hour, then it is that you must get as a minimum that performance from that LED lamp in order for you to realize what it is you expected from that investment. If that LED lamp fails before the 100,000 hours that it was prescribed for, you will not get back all the returns that you had anticipated. If it doesn't consume 5 kilowatt per hour, but consumes more than the 5 kilowatt per hour, then it is that you would have been using more electricity than you had anticipated. So the quality infrastructure, ladies and gentlemen, is important to ensure that it is that you would be able to get what it is, get what you invested in back from that investment. In fact, if your payment, if the time in which your payback period for a LED lamp is after 10,000 hours, and the lamp is supposed to last 100,000 hours, but that lamp's fail in 5,000 hours, you would not even have recovered your investment, much less to make profits. So I know I'm just starting the whole conversation here, stoking the fire. Our colleagues are going to be speaking about a lot of the issues in their instance or in their situations. And so I am going to now go to our panel because they are the experts, they are in-house, and we have them with them to help us to understand what are some of the circumstances in their own jurisdictions, what are some of the considerations. And we have a number of persons that we need to give the floor to. I am going to introduce each one as I call on them rather than introduce everybody carte blanche, because when I introduce everybody carte blanche, you might forget them by the time they make their presentation. So I'm going to start with our standards expert in the house, which is Mrs. Diane Lala Rodriguez. Mrs. Rodriguez is going to speak about the role of quality in facilitating energy investments. In a sense, capturing some of what I may have said a while ago. Just to give you a quick rundown of Mrs. Rodriguez, she holds a Bachelor of Science with honors from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. And she also has an MBA in General Management from the Cavell School of Business at UWI in Barbados. Cavell is in Barbados, for those who don't know. And she earned also a MSc, a Master of Science in Quality Management from Cranfield University, United Kingdom. Mrs. Rodriguez joined the Antigua and Barbuda Bureau of Standards in September 1990 as Manager for Technical Services and became Director in June 1995. And since then, she has been responsible for the day-to-day operations of the Bureau of Standards in Antigua and Barbuda. And this includes preparing and promoting the implementation of standards, including standards related to goods, services, processes, and practices for the purposes of facilitating trade, promoting public and industrial welfare and health, and safeguarding the environment. She also advises the government on standards-related issues affecting trade and economic development, and represents Antigua and Barbuda in regional and international standards areas. Mrs. Rodriguez has served as chairman of Cross-Q Council in the past, from September 2009 to 11, and has been vice chairman previously since September 2006 to 9. And she has also served as the president of the Inter-American Metrology System, what is called SIM. And she did that from 2004 to 2006. She's still Antigua and Barbuda's representative on the Cross-Q Council. So she has years of experience, both professionally, academically, and in practice. And I will therefore ask Mrs. Diane Lala Rodriguez to tell us, about the role of quality in facilitating energy investments from her vantage point. Over to you, Mrs. Lala Rodriguez.
Good morning, Mr. Moderator. Are you hearing me and seeing my screen?
Yes, we are hearing you, and we are seeing. If you would speak up a little bit, or rather closer to your mic, though, because it's a bit low. But
thank you very much.
Great,
is that better?
Yes, you are perfect now. Good.
Okay, Mr. Moderator, members of the panel, may I, with your permission, accept the protocols established by the Chief Executive Officer of Cross-Q, Mr. Derek Omar. And as a member of the Cross-Q Council, I also want to thank those of us on the panel and those of us joining us for participating in today's activity. I will speak this morning a little bit about quality infrastructure at the national and the regional level, something on the state of investment in energy, some areas for attention, the current Cross-Q energy initiatives, the benefits of quality infrastructure, some of which Dr. Gardner spoke about a few minutes ago, and then some ideas for investment in quality at the Cross-Q level, at the investor level, and at the government level. So first of all, quality. We hear quality and it differs, it means different things for different persons. The ISO has a standard definition which speaks about the characteristics and the inherent parts of quality. There are other definitions which speak about the set of attributes of a product, and there is the general one, which is fitness for purpose. So it means different things to different people. It depends on what you're looking for and what performance you get out of the product or service that you have engaged. And all of this is underpinned by quality infrastructure, which is the way in which all the elements of that infrastructure work together as a whole and uses the inputs to produce the outputs that you require. So if we look at our house of quality, we see standards, metrology, not to be confused with meteorology, although meteorology needs metrology. And I managed to say that without biting my tongue. We see inspection, testing, and certification, which all forms part of conformity assessment and accreditation. Now, this is enacted at the national level by the National Quality Infrastructure, but as you could appreciate, we would all not be able to have the same level of quality infrastructure at the national level. And therefore, Cross-Q at the CARICOM level has undertaken to look at the regional quality infrastructure, which is what is needed to be put in place to support the national quality infrastructures where needed, where there are resources and competencies at the regional level, which can then be shared by member states at the national level. In terms of measurement, the previous slides put up by Dr. Gardner spoke about the issues related to climate change. And although our final decision is sometimes qualitative in terms of yes or no, there is a rise, there is a drop, at the end of the day, those decisions are made based on measurements. So we need to have in place the necessary measurement infrastructure in place to support that. Our quality infrastructure in action, we see our standards, and these standards are used to develop technical regulations. Our metrology in all the areas of scientific, industrial, chemical, and legal metrology. We have our conformity assessment activities of inspection, testing, and certification. And that inspection might be at the production level, or it might also be once we are out there in the marketplace, once our products and services have reached the marketplace. All of this is underpinned by accreditation. And this is very nice system, all working. But at the end of the day, we need to get it out there to those who need to know about it. So we need our quality promotions. We need to have our marketing, information, knowledge management, and education. In our energy value chain, we must have technical cooperation and financial cooperation. And what we're looking for at the end of the day, our output characteristics of fit for purpose, durability, efficiency, and reliability. And here, again, now we see we have our quality infrastructure, yes, but how does that quality infrastructure impact on our energy? And the graphic shows us that everything our quality infrastructure impacts on or is needed by the energy value chain. And as was mentioned before, we have that very crucial area at the center, the decentralized area, for which we are not as regulated as the centralized area, and for which quality infrastructure then will have a very high importance. On my right, you will see the international systems. And so that, yes, we do have a national quality infrastructure. Yes, we do have the regional quality infrastructure, but that is underpinned at the international level. And we do have the International Accreditation Forum, the International Laboratory Accreditation Corporation, that provides support for our national and regional accreditation services. We have the international standards organizations that underpin quality infrastructure, as well as international and our national standards. We work in concert with the WTO and our agreement with the WTO TBT agreement to develop our infrastructure with good standardization practices. And again, our metrology services, which are underpinned at the international level by the two premier metrology organizations, which is the Organization for Legal Metrology and the Bureau of International Weights and Measures, who maintain our primary measurement standards. Looking at the elements of the quality infrastructure, again, we look at some of the elements of the elements. So under standards and technical regulations, we see a number of the standards at the international level that relate to the energy area. Number of these standards are being adopted at the regional level and therefore at the national level. There is also, as was pointed out, the Caribbean Regional Energy and Energy Efficiency Building Code, which was developed at the regional level and which has been accepted as the regional standard, and from which member states are expected to adopt as their National Energy Efficiency Building Code and the Energy Efficiency Labeling and Labeling Scheme. Under metrology, we see some of the areas that are required in the scheme of things as it relates to energy. Similarly for accreditation and for conformity assessment. The reason that I have put etc. on all of them is that these lists are not exhaustive. These are just the first ones that come to mind. And underpinning all of this, we will need to have our national and regional quality policies, energy policies, or energy efficiency policies, if you might want to say, as well as our environmental policies. And at the end of the day, we will have to look at how we are achieving our sustainable development goals with what we are doing. So what is the state of investment in energy today? The International Energy Agency is telling us the COVID pandemic has had a widespread and dramatic shock on investments in the energy sector. The resulting energy landscape that will emerge will then be significantly different. A lot will be focused on quality and sustainability issues. These will become more prevalent. We will find probably a lot more focus on solar PVs and wind energy, simply because they are more established, more established of the various areas. And of course, cash-strained companies will be selective about their investment. Just this morning in the news, there was an item out of, I believe it was Guyana, where they were talking about the energy mix and how very different the landscape will be now. There is also some amount of lack of trust between clients and investors. And again, it comes back to us being able, or the client being able to give the investor the assurance of the output and, as was said before, the return on their investments and the profits that will be made from their investment. And we also have some increased constraints on the energy system. And this is basically, again, at the end user level, where you want to know that you're investing in these technologies and that you will not be wasting scarce resources. To overcome some of these barriers, we need to get relevant information to decision makers as quickly as possible. And I dare say that QI services will help in this. We will have to look at implementation of quality energy and environmental systems, as well as the QI systems that services that were referred to before. We will have to reflect some of this information in the agreements and in the tenders that we do. Why not? If this is going to help us and with solidifying those agreements and with simplifying some of the processes. We will use QI services to underpin value for money or best value. So we're not only looking at cost, but we're also looking at performance, availability, reliability, efficiency. And again, we come back to our quality statement of fitness for purpose. So some of the areas for attention, performance standards for public utilities. We don't want our grids to be going down 2 or 3 times a day, and we also want to know that the quality of the energy that we get, the stability is such that it's not destroying our equipment. We need to look at various issues related to energy efficient standards of electrical appliances. We're talking more and more about electrical vehicles or more efficient vehicles. We need to have our standards in place for that. The renewable technologies, as I said before, is going to continue to grow in importance, and we want some assurance of the quality of these technologies. We saw the labeling standards, and under CrossView, we have looked at labeling standards and developed labeling standards. Yes, appliances come with energy labels on them, but those were based and are based on the parameters in the country from which they were produced or imported. So we need in the region to look at what is applicable for us. We spoke a little bit before about, and the CEO of CrossView mentioned minimum energy performance standards for buildings. We have, as we said, the Energy Efficiency Building Code. We're all well and good to have the code, but implementation is required. It's no use having a code and the code is sitting on a shelf, a nicely bound book, nicely colored and everything, but we need to put it into practice. Monitoring and enforcement is then going to be key at the end of the day. The standards for product quality, all the components of the systems as it relates to environmental protection, the technical regulations as it relates to health and safety of the consumer and the environment. And again, we have all of this. We need to address all of these areas, but we also need to get that information out to our consumers and stakeholders, because the only way they're going to use it is if they know about it. And they will also then be asking the pertinent questions, which will force us to look more closely at the things that we are doing and that we are need to be doing as it relates to quality in energy. The current initiatives by CrossQ involve, as we said, the development of the performance standards, the establishment of the labeling scheme, which has already been adopted by a number of countries in the region and is being used on appliances imported. Centers of excellence for testing various countries. The capacity is being built in various countries to test various appliances. The development of standards for PV panels and solar water heaters. Some work is being done in that area. The development of temperature calibration and measurement capabilities and procurement. At the moment, this is ongoing. We're doing some training with the German Metrology Institute, and also there is procurement of some equipment. The Caribbean Energy Building Code needs to be adopted at the national level by the member states, and as I said before, implemented. And again, this has to be underpinned by sensitization and awareness. And the CrossQ Energy webpage, energy.crossq.org, has already been set up. But again, it is somewhat of an, I wouldn't say well-kept secret, because not a lot of persons know about it. So somehow we need to get that out there. So how are we benefiting from quality infrastructure in energy? First and foremost, as with in any quality system, we're screening out harmful products and services, because of course, there will be those persons or those agencies who want to dump where they know that there are no regulations or no standards in place. Product certification of products from other countries will be more easily achieved because it will be easier to validate the certificates. We will be we'll have the opportunity to reduce technical barriers to trade. Efficiencies in manufacturing can be improved because we will now be looking at reduced rework, reduced waste. We are constantly monitoring the processes through the quality infrastructure, and that leads to innovation and continuous improvement. The energy efficiency in buildings covers areas such as air conditioning, heating, building materials, the building envelope, the use of wind directions and winds. And so we are quite on the way to improving our energy and energy usage with the quality infrastructure that we have at present. And one of the main things will be that with these in place, we will be able to build more trust between the client and the investor. The investor is now assured of the quality of the products, services, processes, and practices. He or she feels more comfortable with the investment because they then have some more assurance or a bit more assurance of return on the investment. The consumer and the client is ensured of the quality of the product or service that they produce, and they know that they will be getting value for money. Going back a little bit to investment in quality, we spoke about the standard, the Energy Efficiency Building Code, and our adoption of them at the national level. The code speaks about the efficiency requirements, as I said before, and all the various areas. We're looking at what has already been done across the solar system standards, which is being worked on. And so here we are going to have some assurance of the product quality. We'll be safeguarding public health and safety and general welfare, and setting minimum performance and evaluation requirements for solar thermal systems. A number of energy labeling standards have already been approved, and some of these have already been adopted, particularly in the case of Antigua and Barbuda, which is why I have the ABNS at the beginning, but the standards are all there for adoption and use at the regional level. And at the end of the day, the consumer awareness and education, I cannot stress how important that is, because it allows us to make informed choices and informed decisions. In addition to this, a previous project, the Energy for Sustainable Development in Public Buildings, developed a publication on fiscal incentives and a green building procurement manual. So these are also available for our use in looking at the whole issue of investment in quality infrastructure and investment in energy, and the role of quality infrastructure in energy investment. So for our financial institutions and our investors, some of the areas that we could look at is to include these policy parameters in contracts and contract negotiations, provide more favorable investment conditions for firms certified to energy or quality management standards and producing according to internationally recognized standards, probably lower mortgage rates for those using energy and energy efficiency codes in the design and construction, lower interest rates for businesses investing in energy and for ESCOs, and the provision of training, if not free, at more affordable cost for energy auditors and energy auditors. In terms of the government, we can probably provide some incentives for homeowners where they commit to investing in energy efficiency makeovers, probably reduction in taxes and import duties on energy efficient equipment, attractive rates when they feed back to the grid, probably reduction in property taxes for investment in energy efficiency installation, and lower business taxes for investing in energy efficiencies and for ESCOs. Another point which is not there is I think we need to strengthen the legal and regulatory framework in the region, whether it is energy authorities as it relates to a desk, a division, a regulatory authority on a whole, but that whole legal and regulatory framework needs to be supported. Quality infrastructure is important to realize and to give assurance that our return on our investment is going to manifest itself once we have some of these things in place. Now, this will not be all of it, but this is the basis of what will be needed. So it comes back to the fore that we also need, while we talk about the investment and while we talk about quality infrastructure and energy, we need to look at what are the exact areas that we need to build to support this new energy mix that is on the horizon. Thank you very much. And thanks to the organizers for allowing me to make this presentation. Thank you, sir. Back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lala Rodriguez. Excellent presentation. And the key point was that last point here, where you spoke about the fact that there are two different pieces to the whole thing, that whilst the quality infrastructure focuses on the decentralized and distributed side of things, that there is great need for us to ensure that the regulations on the utility side are effective so that we protect the entire sector. Because as I mentioned previously, all countries have electricity acts, which are laws related to the regulation of these utilities, and that side, everything that happens before the meter usually is regulated through laws, through the electricity laws and the electricity licenses under which the utilities operate. And now we are using the quality infrastructure to deal with everything that happens behind the meter. Without further ado, I'm going to, after that wonderful presentation from Mrs. Lala Rodriguez, I'm going to go to one of the money people in the room. You know, we hear from the standard persons. We're going to go to one of our colleague from the CDB, the Caribbean Development Bank, to get a sense on what are some of the economic and environmental benefits now that we have heard about the role of the quality infrastructure there in facilitating investments. We're going to hear what are the economic and environmental benefits of these investments. And we are going to be speaking to Lano Fonua. Sorry, Lano, if I didn't pronounce it well, you can correct me when you take the mic. Mr. Fonua, Lano Fonua is an operations officer responsible for energy at the Caribbean Development Bank's Economic Infrastructure Development Division and is responsible for identifying potential projects, for preparing projects, for appraising projects, and for supervising approved projects for member countries of the bank, what they call BMCs. He's a certified project management professional, or a PMP, and has a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from Monash University in Australia. Mr. Fonua has over 10 years of experience with energy projects, from design to management to project implementation in the public sector, the private sector, and has worked with state-owned enterprises in some instances in both the Caribbean and the Pacific Islands. I think Lano is from one of the Pacific Islands. I think Tonga. He will correct me when he comes in. But Lano, over to you, please, to speak about what are some of the economic and environmental benefits that we should expect to see from these kind of distributed systems when we invest in them. Thanks much.
Thanks for the comprehensive introduction. I just wanted to make sure the sound's coming through and you're seeing the slide.
Yes, we are hearing your sound. Yeah, and we are seeing your slide. If you could either speak a little closer to the mic or speak a little lower. Yeah,
not a problem. Is that better? A bit better?
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you, Devin, and thank you, colleagues. As Devin introduced, my name is Lano Fonua. I'm an operations officer for energy at the CDB, and as mentioned before, I think there was mention of the investors' view, and I wanted to share some of the experience, I think, from a CDB perspective in financing projects in energy and energy efficiency, and our approach to quality and standards, and then cover some of the economic and environmental benefits, but seen through the eyes of some of our borrowing member countries. So I wanted to go over a case study of Antigua and Barbuda. Seems to be an Antigua and Barbuda day today, specifically with the streetlight project. So and then we'll round off with just some final thoughts on that intersection between standards and projects. So CDB's investments in energy, as most of you will know, is centered around at an impact level, really achieving that global goal 7, ensuring access to affordable and sustainable energy. So over the last 5 years, CDB has financed approximately $240 million in the energy space, and roughly speaking, 30 to 36 million has been in that project preparation design area, and the reason I brought that up is to do with standards, and so that's where our standards falls into place, and this is across our 18 borrowing member countries. Now, our approach to quality is multi-criteria, technical, environmental, social, and financially sound projects are the type of projects that CDB wants to be implementing to not only deliver that global goal, but do it in a way that's effective and sustainable. So all projects have to go through quite an extensive appraisal process, with rigorous internal review across all of those areas. We have in place quite detailed environmental and social safeguards, with the fundamental aim being to do no harm. And how this is how we make sure that projects comply is at a contractual level. These standards, these safeguards, and these approaches are specified in the contracts, and our procurement best practices in line with most multilateral, well, all multilaterals are procurement approaches. So not only do we design the project to meet these requirements, we enforce it through the contract. So at each level, it has to meet standards, I suppose you could say. So it's not only the technical standards, but also contract management standards as well. So I wanted to sort of, I think it's quite powerful to show how this works in practice. So I wanted to touch on the Antigua and Barbuda streetlight retrofitting program, which was the installation of 13,000 LED lamps in Antigua with a retrofitting project. So the new energy efficient lighting ended up costing around $2 million to implement. But there were, from design, as I spoke in the slides previously, from design through to implementation, standards and the approach manifested itself. So that, and I think I'm about to play a video with a number of the project stakeholders, but in their own words, they express some of the economic and environmental benefits of ensuring that this quality and standards approach is integrated within each of those phases of project design. And just some background, our approach from the technical perspective, because I think this is for the standards folks on the call, we really looked at three things here. It's an energy efficiency project, but given that it was the overall aim, the way that we put it together in terms of the evaluation and the procurement process was quality, longevity, and optical performance. So a mean time before failure of over 2 million hours, for example, was used. Optical components had to meet a number of different best practice standards, which were designed by a street lighting specialist engineering firm. And key to sustainability, I think it was mentioned previously, was around maintenance and availability of spare parts. So that's how we scored, or how the contracts procurement process was developed, so that we could score for quality. I think it was an 80-20% split towards quality and cost. So we really focused in on quality. And as I'm about to play this short clip, I think the outcome speaks for itself.
Street lights light the way home and help us to feel safe. However, it comes with a cost. In Antigua and Barbuda, the government's street lighting bill was approximately USD 3.6 million a year. Assistance came from a coalition of partners, the Caribbean Development Bank, the European Union, and the United Kingdom, working together under the Sustainable Energy for the Eastern Caribbean Program, or SEA. The program financed replacement of the traditional street lighting with energy-efficient LED lighting. It's expected to reduce energy consumption by 4,900 megawatt hours a year and save 3,200 tons in carbon emissions.
You have lamps that built to last, according to spec, for 50,000 hours, as opposed to a high-pressure sodium lamp that may last maybe 15,000. Okay, so in terms of how quickly we change out these lamps, it should last us a very long time.
The project is aligned with the goals of the SEEK program, which aims to reduce dependence on imported fossil fuels and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by advancing sustainable energy solutions for CDB's borrowing member countries in the Eastern Caribbean. The more efficient street lighting is expected to save millions of dollars a year for the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda.
Yeah, well, that's the really exciting part. I think that's the part of the imagination. We're estimating there's a savings of about $5 million.
The wide-ranging project also offered the opportunity to make changes for the good of one significant population, Antigua's sea turtles. Street lights near beaches can disorient nesting and just hatched turtles, causing them to wander onto roadways and get crushed by passing cars. With this in mind, turtle-friendly lighting has been included as part of the retrofitting program.
It's a huge impact within the sea turtle and the hatchlings. We have no hatchling crossover coming. Before that, you usually get calls. Sometimes I may have like these little guards around the net. Sometimes people take them off because they want to take them home, and it wasn't helping to keep the hatchling inside so they stay crossed. But now that we have the sea turtle friendly light, we don't have to put no guards on the beach to protect the nest. So,
As of October 2019, 95% of the streetlights in Antigua and Barbuda have been retrofitted, lighting the way for a brighter future of energy security.
Previously, the lights that were there when we were operating, they were dim. These new lights, I have to say, night becomes day. They're very bright. I'm very elated that they were installed.
So yeah, as you can see, I think this project sort of brought it all together. I think you don't usually think a streetlight project can have an environmental impact on sea turtles, but it's something that came out of that design approach and then was implemented through standards, which limited the color temperature of those lights to ensure that that specific population wasn't of turtles on these beach areas wasn't affected, for example. So I think I felt this was a good case study that kind of showed that environmental side of impacts, not just in terms of greenhouse gas emission reduction, fuel savings, which is, a given, I think, for renewable energy and energy efficiency projects, but also this do no harm approach. And just to sum up my final thoughts, I think there are a lot of standards and there are a lot of economic and environmental benefits. I don't think we can necessarily, summarize this easily for the region and every project. But I think the general consensus is that, increased energy quality and reliability and access will equal increased productivity. And there's economic benefits to that energy costs impact all economic activity. So by improving the efficiency of energy production and transport, you will also have this knock-on impact to economic activity. And I think just on a foreign exchange burden side of things, the CDB, one of our go-to assessments of projects is really how much diesel does this reduce, and to convert that into US dollar foreign exchange and see at an economic country level what that impact will be. So I think, that's the wider, those are just my final thoughts on sort of this wider impact that ensuring that these projects that meet these standards and deliver these outputs at the end can have. So yeah, thank you
very much, Lano. Very, very good presentation. Very happy to see the colleagues in Antigua, of course, giving some practical examples of some of the considerations in a real life project that you're doing. It's always good when we don't only hear about the things, but we actually see them in action and know that this is actually work in progress and this is actually work in practice. So thanks for that. And we will move along because I know we don't have much time now, and we will eventually want to have some opportunity for persons to ask questions and to interrogate some more the conversation with the presenters. So we'll move along swiftly to Gerald Lindo from the CCRE, our energy expert one of our energy experts in the house. There are two CCRE people on the presentation, in fact. But Jerry's hat is really that of speaking around the opportunities and challenges, in a sense, reinforcing some of what Lana would have spoken about through an investor's lens. The CCRE is now talking about it through a development institution lens. Mr. Lindo is the CCRE's sustainable energy expert. And of course, apologies if I may not have spelled out the acronym. I just assume the CCRE is an household name. But for those who don't know what CCRE means, it's the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, which is an institution of CARICOM that was established in 2018 to support the implementation of projects and programs for sustainable energy within CARICOM member states. So Gerald and of course Charlene will tell you a bit more about the CCRE itself, but I will introduce Gerald by saying that he's a sustainable energy expert at the center. He has over 12 years of research and professional experience in clean energy and climate change. And he has a vision that climate change is the most pressing challenge facing the region at this time, and that the transition to cleaner energy is the most compelling opportunity to fight the risk, the threats presented by climate change. I share that view too, Gerald. Before joining the CCRE team, Gerald was with the government of Jamaica initially, was with the USAID, was with the United Nations in a variety of technical roles. And he has worked on policy, he has done modeling of both energy and greenhouse gas mitigation. He has worked in the environmental and climate risk management fields. He has done project management, investment mobilization, and of course, has a lot of strengths in international cooperation and negotiation, no doubt from the USAID dates too. Mr. Lindo is a graduate of Williams College and the University of Georgia, obtaining Bachelor's of Arts and Masters of Science degrees in that university. He's a certified energy manager, what we call a CEM, and he wants a CCRE to contribute to the Caribbean's prosperity by enhancing regional cooperation that accelerates investments in people and infrastructure, and of course, leading to world-class services in a spirit of continuous learning and improvement. Gerald, with those few words about you, my dear sir, and my good friend, I will turn over to you to tell us about some of the opportunities and challenges within the CARICOM region for energy investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gardner, and thank you to everybody who's gathered here for this discussion. I'm going to be using as a jumping off point, Dr. Gardner, something that you mentioned in your opening remarks, where we're talking about the integrated utility services model and ESCOs in general. Because I think if we look at this problem through the lens of what a particular investment might look like, we can really elucidate some of the challenges and some of the opportunities, and also the role for quality infrastructure, certification, labeling, and so on and so forth in this energy transition that we must all participate in. Now, as you would have been mentioned, the big picture in terms of climate change, in terms of these global economic trends and this necessary push towards clean energy, and I do mean necessary, it is a fact of physics that we need to transition to zero carbon energy systems if we are to have a stable climate. We cannot go around that any more than we can resist gravity. But while those big picture items are what's driving us, I want us to focus down and think concretely. Not so much what needs to happen over the world, but what is it that's going to make a particular person invest in the energy transition? What is the concrete reality for them? Let's start with an ESCO story, and I emphasize it's a story. It has elements of very nice fantasy in it, but imagine with me. Sanya is a small business owner. She wants to save on her energy costs because, like many other small business owners in the region, it is really pummeling her bottom line. She wants to invest in energy efficiency, maybe put on some solar, but the capital costs are a strain and she doesn't necessarily know a lot about the technology. So Sanya gets to thinking she needs to make an investment. She talks to her power utility about the situation, and the power utility makes her an offer. They will help her lower her bills sustainably through their integrated utility services program. Sanya gets a professional to come out to her facility to invest it, and that professional recommends a well-designed energy solution based off an audit that he does. The vendors who install the equipment are registered energy services companies, all certified and properly licensed, and their work is checked and rechecked for quality. Sanya gets charged for all of this work, but it's on the bill from her utility company. So she didn't have to run up and down to find a loan or to find a vendor. She contacted her utility and they made the whole process frictionless. And she pays for this equipment that she got in an installment on her utility bill. So rather than having the sticker shock or the capex upfront, she pays for it bit by bit. overall, she finds herself in a position where she's paying a bit less than usual on her bills because of the energy savings, plus paying back for the investment. But she knows that once the on-bill financing finishes off and she's paid off all of her installments, she'll be left with a quality infrastructure and a much lower cost of energy, and easier to operate business. Now, this is a story we'd all like to make true, but there are a number of actors in this story with many different interests. We have the consumer, Sanya. She wants better service, she wants more resilience for her business, she wants lower prices. You have the service providers out there who, they realize that people need technical specialists to design the best solutions for them. And these service providers know that they can help and sell their services. You have vendors of equipment who want to increase sales while providing a quality product so that people will come by for more. You have utilities who want to make sure that the services that they offer are not compromised. They want to maintain the stability and quality of the grid. They also want to keep some customers if they can, because they have to satisfy their shareholders in the end. Behind those, you might have financiers who want to take risks, but smart risks. They know a lot about lending cars and houses, but maybe not energy. And above it all, providing the umbrella, you have governments who realize the need for sustainable energy development for their people with good social, economic, and environmental outcomes. Now, the story I told you about how Sanya could roll down to our utility company and get those services sounded fairly simple. The actors are all known to you and they have a straightforward set of motivations. But even those simple or seemingly simple things, when they come into interaction, become complex. This is a diagram of the Integrated Utility Services Market Platform. This was proposed by GIZ through some seminal work done through CARICOM, and it's being advanced now through the community of institutions in the region. I'll walk you through it in roughly clockwise fashion, starting on the left, where we have the client, the Sanya. They want to get energy services, and they're trying to get those energy services from their utility. They have to pay the utility money, and the utility has a customer relationship to them. And they can perhaps give some energy services to the utility even as they are getting their services from the equipment that's installed. To get that installed, you need a utility who is both regulated, so they have a strong framework within which to provide these services, but can also guarantee some of the performance of the technical energy service providers who are going to make the installation for the client. And they have to guarantee it because they are assuming a lot of risk. They have to pay back their financial institutions they have debt for that utility, and they have to be facilitators in the mix who can make those projects happen, who can advise on what the project needs to be and how it needs to be scoped. Very complicated very quickly when you consider all of the places, the people and the points of intervention and interaction that exist just to make this simple transaction happen. And it must be emphasized that many of the issues that happen that make such a frictionless system hard to run boil down to trust. There are a lot of risks that are involved in such a services model. The customer might rightly ask, am I getting a quality product? And do I know that this particular product will work for me like I've seen it work for other people? The bank or the utility might be asking, will this client pay their bills reliably? The person who gets that place installed, that infrastructure installed, so Sanya, once she has her equipment installed now, she needs to know, is this facility performing as it should? Am I getting my energy savings? And therefore, is the bill that I'm paying to the utility correct? Sanya might want to know, will this expensive piece of equipment last for the long haul? Am I confident that I'm making a 10, 20-year investment? And will more people want to invest over time and to seek finance to be able to do so? This is a question the bank might ask. For each one of these elements of risk and trust, there are ways you can meet it through quality standards and other forms of regulation, because these standards and regulation provide a basis for confidence and the lowering of risk, and hopefully you implement them in a way that minimizes red tape to keep the interaction, again, frictionless. You let people know they're buying a quality product through labeling standards, for instance. You know that a client might pay their bills because you have some sort of credit reporting facility or some credit enhancement on the financier side that lowers the risk again. You need people to monitor the facilities to make sure that they're performing up to spec, and so on and so forth. And for each one of these, you need to have some standard referent so you can have a system that people can trust. So within this system, for the CCRE, we see 3 points of intervention that we can make. And we want to ask everybody who's here today and working in the field, what points of intervention can you make so you can facilitate this energy transition that needs to happen? We think we can do 3 things. We can act as facilitators, and Charlene will talk a lot more later about the project preparation facility. Those people who can bring a project from just a concept to real life, to final investment through the provision of necessary studies and so on and so forth. Because the CCRE is a technical organization with a lot of experience working with regulators and utilities, we can provide some guidance up top there of section 2. We can advise regulators and utilities on some of the technical aspects of how you might build out a system such as this, because we'd have experience in working with their particular energy systems. But one more way that we think we can intervene, as one I want to focus on today, is acting as an intermediary between the clients, the utility, and the energy service providers to make sure that quality is adhered to, that electricity cost savings are what they say they are, that the energy services are indeed provided. That is a technical service that is needed for this, this ecosystem to work. Performance monitoring is a critical role to be played in the rollout of ESCO contracts, especially in the context of an IUS model. Organizations must ground themselves in data collection principles, good standards, knowledge of technology, and certification of results. We're talking about things like building codes. Is this particular investment adherent to the building code in the jurisdiction within which it is being made? Is it working with a building code like CREBA that helps to minimize energy costs for the facility? These are questions that must be asked in the start of the performance monitoring process. We have to make sure there's adherence to electrical codes. We have to make sure that the equipment that is bought is listed and properly labeled so that we can be assured of its performance. Similarly, measurement standards for the performance need to be established and agreed to both contractually and internationally, because the international aspect of certification and accreditation matters more and more, particularly when you consider, for example, emissions trading regimes. You cannot trade those certified emissions reductions unless we are very sure that they represent real progress, and you have to have certification to make that possible. These standards, these elements of quality, the quality infrastructure is what forms the basis of trust that a nascent market such as this needs to engender for people to trust it. We think the CCRE can play a good role in this because of our independence, because of some of the technical acumen that we bring, because of our networking, our connection to other institutions within CARICOM and places of expertise through our thematic hubs, and because we have a mandate to do capacity building as well. We don't just want to, so that we can have better and faster deployment of these technologies as we go, as capacity is built. Very finally, how would the process flow work for CCRE in this kind of quality assurance mode? Well, this is the diagram demonstrates it. Basically, once we figure out what sort of intervention needs to happen in an energy facility, we have a contract where there's an agreement on standards and there's a mobilization and some subcontracting of agents to do the monitoring. We set a baseline and we monitor versus that baseline. We have regular reporting to the clients throughout the period of the contract. And then when we close out, we circle back to our knowledge management function. We think about what lessons might be learned from this particular implementation. We think about how do we make sure that there is assurance of quality throughout the process that we implement, and we do it all again, hopefully. I'll pause there for questions, but I also want to leave some questions with the audience. I'd like people to think about, how does my organization facilitate high quality energy investments? I think we all have a role. What technical services do people need to attain their goals? What regulation is necessary versus a barrier to implementation? And finally, how do we learn and adopt better practices quickly so that good pieces of work, good building codes that get developed actually are implemented and don't stay on the shelf? Thank you very much for listening. I turn it back over to you, Dr. Gardner.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Very succinct, very lucid. And before I get to your questions, as you said, you have them to, I'll give the folks some time to chew on the questions you have asked. And in the meantime, too, you know, we will have a couple of other presentations before we get to the interactions with you on the questions and the opportunities for conversation, because we still have a couple of colleagues, including your own colleague from the CECRI, who are to come, and we want to get through those presentations as quickly as possible. So we have, ladies and gentlemen, as Jerry pointed, and thanks for that, Jerry, you have framed out in a practical way how some of the transactions involved in the energy investments could potentially work, especially from the distributed side. From the larger utility side, it's not usually you know, the one which is so challenging, because in those instances, you tend to have batches of lawyers who have experiences of negotiation, who will sit down across tables and negotiate power purchase agreements. It's really more a B2B negotiation. In the case of distributed energy, you're talking about customers who oftentimes are, you know, have distortions in their knowledge and their understanding of the sector, and also their ability to negotiate. Sitting with an ESCO or other service provider who would oftentimes have more information and more knowledge and more competence. So that's something that, of course, is important to understand. And having, as you said, an honest broker who could look after the interests of the customer in those regards is important. In the same way in which at the utility scale, the regulator looks after the interests of the customer on the distributed side, where there is, especially because there's no regulation on the distributed side for many countries, as a matter of fact, for all the countries, that's important. Now we go to the project preparation, where Charlene will talk to us about where does project preparation play a role in financing and getting, in a sense, the deals to flow, because that's really what the PPF is really ensuring that what are really good projects don't end up simply being piped dreams, but rather that they end up flowing through a pipeline to get to financing. So Charlene Bodley is from the CECRI. She's a project development and gender expert and supports the center's strategic program, which focuses on a number of thematic areas. And one of these areas is finance and project support. And the center is working on project preparation as one of its flagship areas within the strategic offerings. The PPF provides both financing, which is through setting up a financial facility or fund, and technical assistance, expertise. So it's, in a sense, seek to convey different things that can move projects through the entire pipe and support things like environmental and social impact assessments, feasibility studies, and any due diligence regarding projects in its development cycle. And in that regard, it tackles, to a large extent, much of the upfront costs associated with the preparation of projects that would usually come before the project starts to make its first dollar. And so Charlene was a Master's of Engineering degree in Energy and Environmental Management from University of Flensburg in Germany. She has postgraduate training through a diploma in geothermal project management and financing from the United Nations Geothermal Training Program in Iceland. And she has a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Engineering from the Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana in Mexico. Given that I'm in Spanish, I should just keep it. So Charlene will speak to us. There are two speakers remaining after Charlene. And so Charlene is the third to last of the speakers. Charlene, over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner, and pleasant good morning to the CrossQ team and to all our attendees to this webinar this morning. So today I will focus a little on the CECRI project preparation facility and how it ties in through its work to quality infrastructure and the work of CrossQ. So I will look a little at the region's project development needs. I will give an overview of the PPF, just that we understand its requirements and its functioning within our landscape. I will bear a little focus on the services that we offer, the business process of the facility, and the eligibility criteria. In 2019, the CCRI conducted a needs assessment for the PPF, targeting both public and private sector. On a private sector end of things, we were really interested in understanding the appetite for that project development support in sustainable energy projects. And so by that, I refer to both renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. And coming out of that needs assessment, it was interesting. I think for the most part, we confirmed what we already believed as technical experts working within the field from the SMEs perspective, and we were able to interview or have responses from close to 200 SMEs across the Caribbean region. And what this essentially proves to us is the fact that there is appetite. So you would notice that close to 60% of respondents confirmed that they had not yet installed any renewable energy or RE projects or other measures. However, there was strong considerations for them to do so. And very close in popularity, nearing 30% of the respondents would have stated that although they had already implemented some means of energy efficiency or renewable energy, that there was a strong indication, an intention to implement more. And so definitely confirmation that there is a market for developing renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. We also sought to understand the challenges in energy investments from the private sector perspective. And we majority of, or I should say close to 35% of respondents listed the fact that there were no financing mechanisms in place to match the needs of the project. Following closely was the lack of technical expertise to carry out technical studies required by financial institutions. And we've been speaking so much about quality infrastructure. Most, if not all of the speakers before me would have touched on that. In particular, my colleague Jerry mentioning all these factors that are important to have a successful energy project implemented. And so the financial institutions need that assurance that through project development that there is risk aversion. And so coming in again right after these would be a lack of expertise to prepare project development documents. And therefore, what is the reality? And much of what we discovered in the study was true, and we were able to align to what we think is the reality. Our reality is that we have a significant untapped potential, both RE and EE. We have indigenous resources across the Caribbean, varying from solar to wind, hydro, geothermal. And now we're talking about emerging technologies, ocean technologies, and hydrogen. How much have we tapped into that? Our 2018 energy report cards signal that the region through the CARICOM member states have only reached 11.7% penetration of renewable energy, while from what we see so far in our data, it does look up, so we're nearing 14% for the year 2019. However, this compared to our regional target of 47%, we're obviously a long way off. And in fact, I believe that as a region, we can even exceed that set target by CARICOM. And so significant new investments in clean energy must be made. And Jerry underscored that. I won't belabor that point, but they must be made to meet energy, climate mitigation, and sustainability goals. However, the potential of which I speak and the opportunities that present themselves for us to unlock sustainable energy investments in the region continue to be largely untapped. We are sure that the region experiences capacity constraints to take sustainable energy projects from concept to investment maturity, or what we know as a household name as bankability, that entire concept of bankability. And therefore, effective project preparation or project development support is essential to attract and accelerate investments. And that is where the CCRI PPF comes in. Essentially, that facility, our vision is that it is a go-to facility for converting promising And I should add here quality, in keeping with our theme for today, quality, commercially viable renewable energy and energy efficiency project concepts into tangible, bankable projects. And the aim of that is that these projects can easily attract financing for implementation. In an earlier slide, I mentioned the view of the private sector in that the biggest barrier was the unavailability of financing. Is that our reality? I do not believe so. Energy and climate having such a close nexus, we are sure that there are quite large pools of financing out there, but bankability is that link between these project concepts and tapping into these sources of financing. And therefore, what is our impact? The vision that we have for our region is to build environmental and economic sustainability. And with that, the PPF offers main pockets of support. For one, provision of technical assistance and advisory services for project advancement towards practical investments. Matchmaking services through specialized investment and business promotion forums. So while we take the projects from concept through a pipeline down to investment maturity, the PPF goes one step further in ensuring that we can link these promising projects, these bankable projects, with investors and sources of financing. And therefore, as a regional institution, the PPF also seeks to maintain and expand a regional project pipeline, therefore allowing us to benefit from economies of scale and therefore attract funding sources. The facility works through cooperation and partnerships, and also provide support, not just to project developers. And by the way, we serve both public and private sector, but we also, on the financing end of things, support financial institutions through capacity building initiatives. And so just some examples of the services that we offer. One, to project proponents, project developers, both private and public sector, business and proposal refinement, project finance, financial modeling and documentation, equity term, offer terms, technical validation and technical feasibility. Lano from CDB mentioned the importance of environmental and social validation, and especially for the public service, we offer support in the development of requests for proposals. And again, quality in infrastructure, being very clear there. So you put out a request for proposals, your technical specifications must be such that you can achieve bankability. And to project investors and financiers, an exhibition of PPF pipeline projects, origination, financier networking, and I'll move to due diligence facilitation. Remember, our financial institutions will not and do not at any point wish to take on the technical risk that come with renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. And therefore, project preparation is essential in lowering or de-risking our sustainable energy projects. And so our business process is quite simple. We begin with orientation. That may be through our web portal, a simple call for projects. We do a lot of awareness creation, outreach, be it on a country level, technology specific calls. And then we move to the selection of projects. Are these projects eligible by the construct of the facility? And if they are, then they are evaluated. And if they do meet the criteria, they are inducted into the PPF. And the importance of evaluation here again is the fact that if we are expending resources to develop projects, we want to ensure that the projects are commercially viable, that they are quality projects that have the likelihood of being financed and therefore being implemented. And then the third process would be the application of our services, both advisory and technical assistance. And lastly, promotion of projects. This is where we link our investors with our projects. What makes a project proponent or an applicant to the facility eligible? Very simple. The project must be located in a CARICOM member state. Likewise, I must mention that in theory, the CCRI, along with its other sister and brother CARICOM institutions, look we look to supporting our associate member states. In terms of the technology and the project proposal, it should include renewable energy. And in cases where it's a hybrid system, a reasonable share of renewable energy is required. Energy efficiency, and we heard Jerry speak about the IUS model, so did Dr. Gardner. Audits, energy management programs, implementation and operation of energy efficiency solutions, demand side management programs, energy service solutions projects, and all of these inevitably require strong infrastructure quality. And again, I want to stress the importance of both the public and private sector in that QI associated with sustainable energy. NEXUS applications include energy and water projects, food and agriculture, so food security being very important for us in the Caribbean. And if COVID hasn't demonstrated that, what will? Productive use of clean energy, health, e-mobility, gender, and so many NEXUS applications. Again, I think very clearly showing us the need for QI. Project types, greenfield, brownfield, or scale-up projects are supported. And I felt it necessary to bear a little focus on how the PPF interacts with this entire topic and concept of QI. For one, we provide advisory services and technical studies to support players in the technology market. And QI is so largely ingrained within that technology market. So these services to developers and service providers. And when we think of financing of projects, it is very clear that both on the lenders and borrowers end, to increase financial resources, that there is that need to increase financial resources, to decrease interest. Both lenders and borrowers want the assurance that loans can be paid. Loans can be paid if your projects through your technologies are performing as planned. How do you get that to happen? And when we think about the banks, one parameter that they use is debt to service coverage ratio. So how much can I cover my debt based on my revenue? And revenue in any RE economic model is tied directly to the production of energy coming out of your system. And that cannot be removed from your technology. And therefore, again, QI being so important in that regard. Advisory services and training to support investors and FIs along the same lines, being able to assess a system beforehand. We are developing a green energy finance toolkit that is with TAPSEC, and SICRI is providing support. That toolkit will be embedded within the SICRI, within our CARICOM Energy Knowledge Hub, which we call our CEKH, and it will provide signposting, technology, market information, and therefore that will lead us to looking at certification bodies and standards related to our sustainable energy projects. And lastly, the CARICOM Energy Knowledge Hub, launched only last month within the SICRI, acts as a data repository and a community of practice. And so we use this project development framework from NREL, that is the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and it looks at these parameters on the right of my screen. When we think of siting, if a project is not properly sited, that affects the production of your system. That relates to QI. The off-taker, we spoke about the utilities, being grid connected requires that certain parameters in the realm of QI is respected. Permitting will require a lot of input, QI input. And of course, I already mentioned technology, among others. How do we do it? We can't do it alone. We work through partnerships, and some of our partners, the logos are on screen, to name a few: Caribbean Development Bank, CrossQ, of course, TAPSEC, Caribbean Export, the CRAF, that's CDF CRAF, and the colleague who comes after me will present on the CRAF, Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator. And at present, we are working closely with PFAN and Get Invest, and they are partnering with us on the private sector stream of the facility in providing advisory services and technical assistance through the CCRI PPF along with the CCRI staff. And with that, I invite you to enjoy a very brief animation that summarizes what the CCRI PPF project preparation facility really is. Thanks.
The Project Preparation Facility, or PPF, is a project development support resource designed to help you advance the preparation of sustainable energy projects so that they can successfully attract financing. The PPF not only provides advice and technical assistance, but also helps to link bankable projects to investors and financiers, and serves as a pathway to much-needed financial investment. If you are a project owner, private sector developer, part of an NGO or similar enterprise seeking to advance a sustainable energy project in the CARICOM member states, then you may qualify for support. The Project Preparation Facility supports medium to high capacity renewable energy and energy efficiency technology projects, including biomass and biofuel, biogas, geothermal, ocean technologies, solar PV and thermal, hydropower, energy storage, wind, waste to energy, and greenfield, brownfield, and scale-up enterprises such as energy power generation, efficiency, and solutions projects. For more information on project preparation facility support, visit www.ccreee.org/ppf.
So I thank you for your attention. I hand you back over to our moderator, Dr. Gardner, and I shall see you again during the question and answer segment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlene. And I will move quickly into the other presentations. We heard quite a bit about the fact that there is facility now to support countries improving on the quality and the quantity of projects that they will be deploying, and the role of quality infrastructure of ensuring that those quality requirements are met. Eugene Williams is next on the agenda, ladies and gentlemen, and Eugene is from the CARICOM Development Fund, or what we call the CDF. Mr. Williams is the Resource Mobilization Officer at the CDF, and he has over 33 years of experience in management, development, cooperation, project management, and the financial service industry, serving in a marketing, business development, and managerial role. He has experience in mutual funds, in small and medium enterprise sectors, and in export trade industries, in trade facilitation agencies, and regional and international organizations. Over the last 3 years, he has been focusing more so on initiatives related to renewable energy in the small and medium enterprises, or what we call SMEs. The fact is that energy has been recognized as the cost of energy, and it has been identified as a key inhibitor to the ability of SMEs to compete and make significant amounts of profit and revenue. We have found that because of the significant cost of energy as a proportion of input into the operations of SMEs, that SMEs have not been as cost competitive as they could be, and therefore they are not able to grow and expand and support economic development in the way that we would have liked them to. And Mr. Williams will speak to a large extent on the credit risk abatement facility that is related to how we can improve the access of SMEs to what we would call investments in clean energy, especially from the distributed side. things like rooftop PV, things like efficient air conditioning, efficient cooling, efficient heating, and so on. Mr. Williams is the holder of a BSc, a Bachelor of Science degree in Public Admin, and an MBA in Strategic Management and International Marketing, both from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. And he also holds postgraduate certification in Marketing and Consumer Behavior, again from the UWI St. Augustine campus. So Mr. Williams will talk to you about the Credit Risk Abatement Facility, which is a cooperation among, as you heard from Charlene and Jerry, institutions of CARICOM and the Secretariat and member states. So over to you, Eugene, who is our penultimate speaker, and then we will go invest as our final speaker after Eugene would have spoke. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Devon. Is my screen being seen?
Yes, your screen is being seen, and we are hearing you. You just need to speak a little louder. Thanks.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. All protocols being observed. I just want to state that in the interest of time, that the case has been made for quality standards and quality infrastructure as it relates to renewable energy, energy efficiency, and the financing or investments in same. So that has been established by the various speakers preceding me. And the question at the end of the day is, who finances this? It comes down to financing of these wonderful initiatives. We can look outwards for others to finance it for us, which has been a mode relied on in the past, or we can seek to crowd in local private sector finance or participation, which in my view is a more sustainable approach and one which the craft is predicated upon. I'll talk about this as my presentation continues. So just a bit of background, the CARICOM Development Fund was established under the provisions of Article 158 of the Revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, specifically for providing financial and technical assistance to disadvantaged countries, regions, and sectors that are participating in this CSME. And basically, we seek to address any negative impact from the economic and social dislocation arising from the implementation of the CSME and the structural diversification needs of disadvantaged countries, regions, sectors. Currently, there are 12 members of the CDF, 12 member states of the CDF, and these are highlighted on the slide here: Antigua and Barbuda, Belize, Barbados, Dominica, Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. Now, Caribbean countries have made steady progress over the last 10 years towards reducing their dependence on fossil fuels and thereby reducing their greenhouse gas emission. This march forward is critical in improving the competitiveness of their economies and businesses if they are to achieve economic, social, and environmental sustainability and resilience. To address the growing threat of climate change, innovative financing institutions are required, with more support from the private sector and SMEs in particular. Regionally, SMEs contribute some 50% of GDP and employ roughly 70% of the workforce in the Caribbean region. In terms of financing renewable energy and energy efficiency initiatives, some of the existing financing mechanisms available currently are government guarantee mechanisms by various institutions, be it the central bank or the state-run entities. We have donor finance mechanisms such as EcoMigro, which is a facilitation led by IDB, the Nordic Development Bank, and others. And then you have the commercial banks, credit unions, and finance houses or non-bank financial institutions in member states, which also provide financing for these types of activities. The challenge, however, has been one of lack of access to finance. While banks and other financial institutions currently are sitting on a pile of money, the issue has been lack of access to that finance. Also, the issue of traditional financial products having limited appeal, and the issue of lack of understanding of REEE solutions by both financiers as well as SMEs. And we have a need for training of financial services providers and SMEs to better understand REEE initiatives and the solutions and how they can be applied to the mutual satisfaction of all stakeholders involved. Now, some time ago, I think it was about 2 years ago, a study was commissioned by the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation in Jamaica, the Climate Change Division specifically. And this study was done by Winston McCullough. And his findings point to a need for some type of intervention to help unlock access to finance by addressing three issues: credit risk, capacity building, and regulatory stability. And this study was done among SMEs across the region in terms of trying to spur investments in RE and EE initiative, thereby enhancing their competitiveness and ability to trade and export within the region as well as outside of the region. Now, CDF, which has been in operations for a bit over 10 years now, we, in our flagship product, which is our country assistance program, whereby we provide financial and technical assistance to member states, we have supported investments in a number of areas, and we have identified that the energy sector is one of the critical areas, especially in terms of our SMEs, whereby we can make an intervention that will positively impact the business sector as well as member states and the individuals in those member states and the quality of life. And we did a study into the renewable energy opportunities for SMEs. And in terms of the energy sector barrier, we identified a number of issues for financial institutions, for SMEs, and for the energy sector as a whole. In terms of financial institutions, chief being the limited accessibility of finance available for SMEs to invest in REEE. Where credit lines do exist, the approval processes are inefficient, and in some cases, there are no dedicated finance for SMEs or for REEE projects. The issue of the renewable energy efficiency benefit not being considered in the risk analysis done by the financial institutions and to a lesser extent SMEs is one of the barriers as well. Then we have the issue of high collateral requirements that SMEs cannot meet, cash flow problems that SMEs have, the limited availability of technical assistance to design, install, and monitor REEE, the shortage of technical skills for designing these installations and operation, the impact of climate change on energy infrastructure, issues of community distrust, gender inequality, and more recently, the COVID-19 pandemic restricting growth of SMEs. So some of these issues were addressed and touched on by panelists previously, so I won't go into detail on them, but just to identify that this diagram clearly shows, we have some challenges which we need to address. And out of that study, and based on work that was done in conjunction with the Secretariat, the JZ, we were able to engage a consultant to help us undertake a scoping mission and design a model for the credit risk abatement facility, which addresses the issues that were identified in the McCollum study, which is that of credit risk, the issue of technical assistance, which has been pointed out by most of the speakers previously, and the third pillar of the credit risk abatement facility, or CRAF, is the M&E framework, which provides a feedback for us to understand some of the challenges in implementation, how we can refine them, and also to be able to share with our partners in forums such as these and others, the feedback that we would have received from the stakeholders, so that we can use that to enhance and benefit all stakeholders in the diagram that I'm sharing here, which would include the financial institutions, the energy service companies, the SMEs, and the energy service providers. So we provide not only the partial credit risk instrument to incentivize financial institutions to on-lend to ESCOs or energy service providers, but we also provide technical assistance for SMEs in terms of energy audits, helping them to develop their financing package to the banks. We also provide training for financial institutions and others, as well as ESCOs and the energy service providers. And we do this in conjunction with our partners in the region, such as SICRI and other international partners. With the CRAF, we are not seeking to duplicate existing activities or initiatives that are ongoing on the ground. So we seek to partner with players who are providing those initiatives and leverage that to the beneficiaries, be the SMEs or the financing institutions of the ESCO. What the CRAF does really and truly is provide a partial credit risk instrument or a guarantee, for the want of a better word, to financial institutions to catalyze them or help spur them to on-lend to SMEs. Now, generally speaking, SMEs, some SMEs have the strength of their brand, their balance sheet, that they can go to a financial institution and access financing for REOE initiatives. But there are others who, for either lack of collateral or lack of cash flow, but they still do have a bankable project or one that is worthwhile, they are not able to meet the criteria of the financial institution, and as such are not eligible for a loan. We will step in with the CRAF and provide that partial risk guarantee, where we say to the financial institution, whether it be the commercial bank, development bank, credit union, as the case may be, that we would provide a guarantee up to 80% of the loan, so that in the event of default, they make a claim on the CRAF so that they feel comfortable in on-lending or extending their financial hand to these SMEs, so that they can engage in whether it's retrofitting energy efficiency equipment through their establishment, or putting in solar PV systems or wind, as the case may be, so that they can reduce their power consumption. That savings in their energy bill is what will go towards repayment of the loan. And for that, because we have changed the flavor of the risk to the financial institutions, we would expect that they would provide a lower rate of interest to the borrower, thereby bringing down his costs even further. So these are the key design features of the CRAF. I spoke about the credit risk instrument in terms of the partial cover up to 80%. It allows for savings to generate cash flow, etc. We do provide a technical assistance to support all the stakeholders, the financing partners, the service providers, as well as the SMEs. Thereby, we're building an ecosystem to support the craft and our partners to stimulate demand and to generate that pipeline of deal flows to the financing institution. And of course, the third pillar being the monitoring and evaluation, which provides the feedback and assesses performance and impacts. So in terms of this slide here, just shows the flow of funds in terms of the guarantee from the CRAF, from CDF. It goes to our partner financial institutions who then issue loans to the SMEs. The CRAF does not provide direct financing to SMEs or beneficiaries. What we do is, as I said before, we seek to incentivize or act as a catalyst to the financial institutions to lend to the stakeholders, in this case SMEs, etc., so that they can engage in these initiatives for the benefit of reducing their costs and being more competitive in the marketplace. So the CRAF really provides or enables financial institutions to enter new markets where they perceive risk as high and where they may otherwise have been unable to generate sufficient demand for financing. It safeguards the amount of the investment for which recipients pay a small fee. And as I said, the presence of the guarantee changes the flavor of the tenor of the risk. And as such, we expect that the banks will pass on that in the form of lower interest rates to the SMEs. So by supporting SMEs investment in RE, we enabling innovation in REEE, we supporting a resilient livelihood for SME workforce, and we seeking to, as I said before, catalyze transformation of the energy market, and all at the same time, in terms of from our monitoring and evaluation pillar, we will be developing evidence-based information which would support policy shifts or changes that are necessary to enhance the entire environment. So the CDF has capitalized CRAF with an initial sum of 10 million US for the credit risk instruments. The technical assistance program is going to be kicked off with 2 million US. And in terms of operations, we have put aside 500,000 for that. So a total sum of 12.5 million US. We have capitalized and started the CRAF, which was launched in November of 2020 in conjunction with the PPF of SICRI. So we are now into our pilot phase, which started January 1st of this year and runs until the 31st of December of this year. Beyond this year, we will begin the full-scale rollout among the other member states in CARICOM. Currently, the pilot phase, we have started with 2 countries, St. Lucia and Belize, and there are 3 others that we're going to bring on in the pilot phase: Barbados, Suriname, and Guyana. Some key impact summaries. In terms of the pilot phase, we are seeking to support roughly about 104 loans split between renewable energy initiatives as well as energy efficiency initiatives. And we are estimating that we would be supporting roughly about 26.1 million US in loans and generating a cost savings of 3.3 million US dollars in the pilot phase. In the full scale rollout, the stats are there, where we intend to ramp up exponentially. In terms of the UN Sustainable Development Goals supported by CRAF, UN SDGs 5, 7, 8, 9, 12, 13, 16, those are the ones that would be impacted by CRAF. And that's about it. So I would stop there, and in the Q&A, any questions or comments with respect to the CRAF, how it works, what sectors that we focus on, I can take those questions and deliver those answers. I will just end by saying that in the initial phase, we are focusing on the agriculture sector, tourism and manufacturing. Thanks very much,
Thank you
Devon.
very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Eugene. And excellent for that presentation that outlined the CRAF and told us a bit about what the CRAF is intending to do in terms of stimulating investment. And naturally, you have pointed out, as with all cases before, that the investments can be ring-fenced and should be ring-fenced within the quality infrastructure environment. So I hope that we will get some time for questions. I know we're running very late because we have gone over our little times each where presentations are concerned, but we do have one more presentation, and we will see how quick best we can manage that to get in a couple of questions from the colleagues in the audience. So I will jump immediately to the final, last but by no means least, presenter, GetInvest, our colleague from GetInvest, our guest from outside of the region, Mr. Jerry Okoko, who is going to talk about issues related to investments and some of the opportunities that he has seen in his work in respect to clean energy investments in Africa and the Caribbean. He has experience, and he will talk about those experiences in the Caribbean and so on. So Jerry is, has a lot of work experiences, as I mentioned, in energy infrastructure development and project development, especially on the finance side. And he has worked in Africa and the Caribbean, both as an investor and sponsor of projects, as well as an advisor to private and public sector clients. He has experience and expertise too in many thematic areas of investment. And financing is one of the key areas that he has experience in. Transaction structures is something he has also supported for the development of renewable energy projects. And of course, we know about the issue of transaction costs being too high in the Caribbean. And small business development, incidentally, is something he has done work on, Eugene, so it would be interesting to hear that. And capacity building too. And he has co-developed and invested in with his own money. So this is somebody who doesn't just talk about investment, but spend his own money to invest in several renewable energy projects. So many of us in this room have invested in renewable energy projects, or even clean energy as a whole. There's at least one, there's Jerry. I can also say myself, but anyway, Jerry will speak about work that includes financial modeling, business model articulation, which he has done before. He has prepared project teasers and identified presentations and projects with many investors. In a sense, this is someone who has walked the walk along the entire value chain of the project development cycle. So I will turn over to Jerry Okoko to share with us his expertise and experiences on the investment opportunities for sustainable energy in the Caribbean, and of course for us to then interrogate the panelists, maybe with one round of questions, but we will see how that goes. Thank you very much. Over to you, Jerry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gardner, for that wonderful presentation and introduction. As per protocols, thank you to yourself and the other hosts for inviting myself and the GetInvest program all together. It has been a wonderful so far to listen to the other panelists and to learn so much from them. And I reach out and thank them as well. And for any person that I may have missed out, or organization, as we like to say, all protocols observed. In the interest of time, I would like to keep things very tight and brief, because a lot has been said that more or less overlaps. And so I want to focus on the areas of our particular interventions, our particular programs, and give you a little bit of information about myself and what it is that I do with the GetInvest. To that effect, I have prepared and passed over a very brief presentation from the GetInvest PowerPoint. I have a PowerPoint slide that went up there, and that should be visible. Let me try and see if I can share my screen on that so that you can see what we have. I'm bringing it up now. Okay, so I hope you can see it. It should be visible.
Yes, Jerry, we are seeing it now. If you'll only just put it in presentation mode, then we'll be fine.
Yeah, okay, good stuff. So it's over there. So the I'm going to speak about the program a little bit, very quickly, and then about how I work with...
Presentation mode, Jerry.
Sorry?
Put your slides into PowerPoint presentation mode. If you go down to the PowerPoint application, the MS Show PowerPoint, you want to go to Show PowerPoint.
Slideshow, let's see.
Yes.
Okay.
You don't want it, okay, so.
Is that not?
I see it now, yes.
Okay.
But then when the slideshow, you don't have control over the speed at which it changes. So you have to go to the Show PowerPoint, Show presentation mode.
It's okay. I mean, I'll just run through this.
Okay, fine.
Real quick. So the Get Invest program is a European Union funded program, taxpayer funded program, delivered to clientele at no cost to the recipient. So that's pretty nice. It is targeted primarily at the private sector as well as public sector organizations in areas to advisory services towards facilitating finance, as well as working with organizations to do technical assistance, capacity building, and essentially providing as well matchmaking services with financial providers. You've heard from some of my colleagues that I heard earlier, CCRI, we work with organizations such as CCRI to essentially create the matchmaking and facilities towards financing for their clients as well as our joint clients. And this relationship is expanding and growing into a more robust partnership, as I like to call it. We essentially mobilize investments through a catalytic process. You've heard a lot about the PPF facility from the CCRI representative, so I will not belabor that point. We support projects and companies, link them to financiers, public and private. We have a team of experienced advisors spread around different regions of the world because we do cover, in addition to the Caribbean, which is my coverage area, we do have coverage in Africa as well as the Pacific Rim recently. And we have advisors in the different regions that do that coverage. The service, as I mentioned, is on demand and it is free of charge. There is an application process that is visible on our website, whereby it's all electronic. You would apply for the service and it is reviewed internally, and should you be accepted for delivery of service, you will be taken in and assigned to an advisor who will walk you through your needs as you identify them and help you to achieve them. In the interest of being brief, I just want to use a real-world example of the Caribbean region, whereby an applicant made an application through our web portal. The application was assigned to an advisor. In this case, it happened to be myself. We met with this person, got to understand their needs, and then went ahead and made an introduction to what we believed was a suitable financier. And this resulted in an actual offer of financing, in this instance, to the tune of $15 million. In this case, the applicant was from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The company is called SoLife. They lease rooftops, commercial rooftops, and then tie into the grid to sell to the power utility, in that instance, Vinlec. And the proprietor of the business wanted an assistance in setting up the business model, validating the business case, and then identifying suitable sources of equity and debt financing to make the project into a reality. We've been in touch with SoLife for several months now. We have performed the services that they desired, and we were successful in identifying an equity financier as well as debt financier rolled into one offer that has expressed a firm interest in the investment. I can't reveal the name of the company right now because they're negotiating terms and conditions, but the point was that it was a very successful outcome and went to demonstrate the kind of interventions that the Get Invest program does in the renewable energies field in the Caribbean region. So we are always on the lookout for such opportunities of private sector investments, as well as public sector. And somebody had mentioned earlier regulatory frameworks. We have found that those need to be strengthened across the region, because as you get into efficiency, and as you mentioned, Dr. Gardner, as you get into efficiencies and focusing on new standards, this creates the needs for audits, this creates the needs for certification processes and procedures, and that creates the needs for experts. And all that is a capacity building process. And when that happens, it also creates the opportunity and opportunity for investments by the private sector, and in addition to the public sector as well. And when those investment opportunities get created, then folks like myself step into the picture to provide that financial advisory of linking the finance to that opportunity. We do that through our Financier Information Network. It is available, or will be coming soon, online. You can take a look at the kinds of work that we have done and get an idea of how we can be of assistance. This is the application website that one would take the application to and input. It walks you essentially, it's a very easy Q&A type process that will understand better what it is that you need from us. So that is the end of the slide presentation. I didn't want to take too long because I knew I was going to be under time constraints. But overall, as you had mentioned earlier, I myself come from a project development background, finance of projects in renewable energy sector. A lot of that was in Africa, and we had money at risk, our own funds. So you correctly pointed out, whereby we invested direct funds from the point of entry. So project identification, point of entry, raising of funding. We raised over 100 million US towards those Africa projects, getting into operations and then exiting. So we were also able to provide our investors with an exit ramp where they were able to realize the fruits, I guess, of their investment to everybody's benefit. So my work now is to essentially carry over that experience into the Caribbean region, identify the entrepreneurs, identify the governmental bodies, the municipal bodies, whereby we can replicate those models of success to encourage private sector participation in these opportunities that we're discussing and link them to finance, so that the financial folks can also benefit from the opportunity. Because the resource is there, as has been mentioned. The sun is shining most of the time, so it is there. The question becomes, how do we channel that investment or that opportunity into a financial opportunity? And that's where we need to have good prepared entrepreneurs, well-prepared regulators, well-prepared utilities, and so on and so forth. So once that chain is smoothed out, and this is what many of my prior colleagues have been speaking in this webinar, once that chain is smoothed out, you'll find that investment flows quite a bit. I like to say that investment is like water. It follows the path of least resistance. And the resistance items here are bureaucratic, regulatory, and all the usual that we all know about. And the less resistance there is, the more investment flows. I'm happy to be a participant in the Q&A, but I know you're under time constraint, so I will end my presentation here.
Thank you, Jerry. Very succinct, very lucid. I guess we can tell a real businessman when they're in the place, so don't waste time. Okay, colleagues, we are at 12:26 now. I'm waiting to be guided by the cross queue as to whether we can take one or two questions. We were supposed to have ended at 12, so we are already past our allocated time. I have not seen. I was told that we should have encouraged questions in the in chat. I perhaps had not done enough to do so. I have looked and I have only seen one asking about the power purchase agreement with SoLife. Is that with Vinlec? And Jerry did mention that the power purchase agreement was between SoLife and Vinlec. But I've not seen any other questions. I've not seen anything burning, emerging. I guess the presenters have all been very, very lucid and very, very straight. As I mentioned, Jerry, the only question I see is the one which asks if the power purchase agreement with SoLife was between SoLife and Vinlec, and you did answer that eventually. So we can take. I was directed by my colleagues from CrossQ that we can take 3 or 4 questions. Well, let me start by asking the panelists if they would like, if there's any question that either of them would want to ask of each other. No, having listened to each other. It's always good to hear panelists interrogate panelists. So let me start. I'll take, they said I can take 3 or 4 questions. So I'm going to ask for 2 questions among the panelists. Is there anyone from the panel who would like to ask a question? Just indicate by show the raise a hand feature, and I will give you the chance to ask a question of your fellow panelists. It's good to stimulate and start the question in the panel. I see Jerry raise his hand. I know Jerry would have come. So Jerry, open your mic, please, sir. Turn your camera on and ask the question. Thank you.
Sure, and just to get the conversation started, I'd like to ask particularly our colleagues from CrossQ, and maybe also the other Jerry, since you'd have the business focus. We all know it's important to have standards and to enforce those for a variety of technical reasons. At the same time, in order to keep things fluid, to keep investments flowing, you want to have as least amount of red tape as possible. In practice, what's the best way to balance that need for rigor with the need for ease of use in terms of balancing standards regimes with the need to reduce red tape?
Was that question at me, Jerry?
I think that could be for you, Jerry, other Jerry, but it could also be for CrossQ.
You know, I had to sneak that in.
Okay, so that being the question, the balance and the need for the red tape, I think clearly we have to move quickly in putting in place, for instance, a standards development plan that's going to support this. And bearing in mind that standards take a little while to develop, we have to provide the resources that will be needed to develop these standards. Then we need to make sure that these standards are understood and that then they will be used. Because if you use the standard in, for instance, a contract, although a standard is a set of voluntary requirements, the contract makes them somewhat mandatory. And so we're therefore faced now with conditions in the contract and in the negotiations that we must meet. So I think it is a good way of doing it because the requirements that we would take out of the standards would have already gone through a rigorous evaluation process. So, I think that's part of the reason why we, as the quality infrastructure people, see the importance, the high importance of using the quality infrastructure service in this particular sector. I don't know if that answers your question to some extent, at least.
Yeah, thanks for that. Well, maybe the other Jerry could attempt to give the private sector view. Thanks for that, Dan.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Gardner, and thank you, my namesake, for the question. Essentially, looking at it from the private sector point of view, as I would, is yes, the role of the standards, the clearer they are, the better articulated they are and easy to understand they are, makes it so much easier for an incoming investor or a local businessman or woman to make a decision on how to pursue a particular opportunity. So the red tape would be lessened basically by the clarity of the standards or the clarity of the regulation, such that there is no need, or there is a reduced need for interpretation, because typically that's where the red tape steps in. You make an application, they'll tell you, we'll come back to you in 3 weeks or 3 months, because we have to understand what you're saying. And then they come back within a series of circular Q&A sessions. What did you mean by this? And what did you mean by that? Can you clarify X? It doesn't meet, zoning code 1 point da 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 da. And essentially you're just passing time in this instance.
But Jerry, is that an issue of competence within the competent authority, so, for want of a better word, or is it really a lack of clarity in the standards?
No, it's both, because when you have the standard clear, they're then easier to read into and easier to interpret.
Okay.
So it's almost like in the United States, the joke going with the IRS and the tax code, because it's impossible to understand what the tax code is if you're not a person from that world. So then you have to hire a tax accountant or a tax advisor, and so you're introducing layers of bureaucratic elements in between yourself and the end game, in this instance being the taxman. So if I'm looking at it as a business person and I'm stepping into a Caribbean country and I want to invest in a renewable energy project, the first thing I'm looking at is, what are the regulations around this investment? What are the legal ramifications around this investment? The standards, as you mentioned, the regulatory framework, the judicial framework as well, because you do get instances of conflict, of adversarial situations. So you want to know what the legal situation is of your investment. So all those come into play, and clarity really, or sunshine into that darkness or gray area, greatly eases the burden of investment.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Well said.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Silano has asked for the second question. So mic and camera, Lano, over to you, sir. You're muted, Lano. You're muted still.
Sorry about that. I was just more responding to the question more than having a question.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, bureaucracy and multilateral donors, unfortunately, usually seen as coming together. But I think you touched on capacity there, and I think it's you've got two things here. One is the need for speed on one side, and then the other one is, we're talking about sustainable and the best product. And I think if I go back to this energy efficiency lighting example, if we had gone for cheapest available, and the utility at the time had been given some samples from that were really cost effective, let's call them, but they didn't have the meet those standards, and they had installed them anyway as a pilot, and they began to fail, for example. So they got them up faster on one end, but they didn't last longer. And I think you heard the engineer talking about time of life. And so, I think it's one thing to judge everything on that initial speed, but if you're talking about 20 years lifetime of equipment or infrastructure, I mean, that's the spectrum, and it's hard for humans. We got a deadline next week, we got a deadline next month, we got a big meeting to deliver for, and so we tend not to think in that 20-year time span, but a 6-month or a 12-month design period as part of a 20-year investment, I think is more puts that in the perspective that I think it needs to be in, and particularly if we're talking in multi-million dollars investments that need to be protected from the investor's point of view. I think that sets it more in the context where I think the conversation should go, and that helps, at least in my experience, when talking to stakeholders around that question, because it's always, we need this done immediately. So I thought that might be something that might
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Lana. I know one, I don't want to give advertising, but I do know one company in the Caribbean as an example, whose if you want to call it, motto is do it right the first time so we don't have to do it again. So it goes back to what you're saying. So do it right. If you do it right once, you don't have to do it twice.
Exactly.
So that's interesting, and that's what standards help you to do by putting in the standards. Apart from just the knowing what you're paying for, that you're getting what you're paying for, it also removes some of the risks associated with failure. So that is very important. I'm checking to see whether there are any other questions that are emerging. I see that there is one question about how we can access SMEs for the craft. Yes, Eugene, there's a question for you coming from the floor. The question is, how can SMEs access the craft? If you could quickly walk us through that in less than a minute and a half. I know you should be very versed in everything quickly.
Certainly. As I indicated, the craft has been launched officially. Last month, we have signed on in St. Lucia, one of the 2 pilot countries that we're in, the St. Lucia Development Bank. So persons who are SMEs who are resident in St. Lucia can approach SLDB. In Belize, we are close to finalizing a master agreement with the development bank there. And we are also in the process of finalizing 2 master agreements, one with a regional financial institution and another development bank. But aside from that, the individual or SMEs can visit our website, www.craft.org, for more further details, where they can get information in terms of walking through the process.
All right, thanks, Eugene. So what you're saying is, one, they can go to the website to get information. If you could type the website in the chat so everybody could see it, just in case they didn't hear it, that would be helpful. And you're saying, too, that at the States, you have relations with the St. Lucia Bank.
Development Bank.
And with the DFC in Belize, so soon to come. And
yes,
the current ones that you are working through, but that the essence is that persons would have to work through their banks in their respective countries to access the craft. And
banks or other financial institutions, credit unions, development banks,
Okay, credit unions, development banks in countries where it's available. So right now, St. Lucia and Belize are the 2 countries where the master agreements exist, you are saying?
St. Lucia, it exists. Belize, we are almost at the point of signing.
Okay. Is there
by middle of next month, we will definitely be on.
Are there other countries to come? Are there other countries to come soon?
Yes, as I said, we are working with a regional financial institution that has branches throughout the Eastern Caribbean, etc. And that would possibly in the next 4 to 6 weeks, we'll be able to announce that.
That would open the markets up. Okay, thanks a lot, Eugene.
Yes.
Thanks for that. Okay, so I see one question, another. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to stop here, ladies and gentlemen. I think I've detained you, 40 minutes beyond what was scheduled. We have had some good information, really good exchanges. I think that, we would have left here today with a better understanding on where are some of the opportunities for investment in the clean energy sector and why it's important to invest in clean energy, certainly sustainable energy, being in renewable energy and energy efficiency more so. We spoke to a large extent about the important role of regulations and both if you want to call it, the regulated side of the sector and the unregulated side. And we spoke about the fact that the quality infrastructure is critical to managing the regulatory issues or the absence of regulations in the unregulated sector. In a sense, the standards and quality that we are used in the regulated sector usually are managed through the legalities of electricity acts and electricity licenses. But we recognize that also within the distributed sector, where it is that there are many players, many actors, many technology suppliers, many end users, that there is need for quality services there, and that the quality infrastructure would allow us to help users on that side in getting the right value for money. And not just right value for money, but as Lana pointed out, is also save your time and effort, because it's not easy to do something 2 and 3 times and it doesn't work. You know it is when you do, when you build something or you set something up and it's bad enough that you lose the money, but then you have to waste time to take it down and change it and go through the process all over again. At this point, I'm going to turn over to our colleagues from this cross queue for closing. It's now 12:41 p.m. by my clock, and I want to thank all of you for giving us the attention today. I want to thank the panelists before I turn over to cross queue, because we had very, very, very beautiful dialogue among them. Our closing remarks will be given by Deka Straker, who is a regional energy apprentice at the cross queue. And I hope I didn't butcher Ms. Straker's name too much, but she will correct me if I did. But over to you, Ms. Straker. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is actually Deka Straker, and as Dr. Gardner said, I am the Regional Energy Apprentice at the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, CrossQ. And on behalf of the management and staff of CrossQ, we would like to thank you for joining us today. Generally, when persons think of quality infrastructure, they think of trade facilitation and not necessarily how it is integrated in our everyday life and its importance to products and services, consumer safety, or the environment. It's not quite easy to see the importance or the link between quality and energy and the role it plays in getting returns on financial investments. This was clearly outlined during our presentations today by our esteemed panelists. As a young professional in the energy sector, I am confident that the points and presentations made today, that the region is heading in the right path. We hope that this forum opens the dialogue among relevant agencies and strengthens and establishes further collaboration among regional partners in ensuring that quality plays a role in investment, specifically as it relates to the development of MSMEs and industries in the region. With that, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the parties that made today's proceedings possible. We would like to say a big thank you to our project sponsors, the European Union and the International Cooperation Department of the Federal Republic of Germany and the GIZ. We would like to also say a big thank you to Dr. Devon Gardner for so ably moderating our panel and setting the context of the discussion with his opening remarks. Thank you, Dr. Gardner. To our panelists, Ms. Lala Rodriguez, Mr. Fauna, Mr. Lindo, Ms. Bodley, Mr. Williams, and Mr. Okoko, we thank you for your very informative presentation and for sharing examples of the quality consideration in investment opportunities and the work that is being done in the region. To our panelists, to our participants and attendees, we thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that the information shared today would be beneficial to you, your organization, and your community. CrossQ is conducting a series of webinars. So we invite you to join us in our next webinar on June 3rd, 2021, entitled Quality in Energy: Why the Regional Energy Sector Needs Quality Parameters. We will be sending the meeting information in short order. So again, thank you to everyone for being a part of our program today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good day.
Thank you all. Thank you, CrossQ.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Peace and love. Bye-bye.
Mr. Gardner, are you still there?